Water Lily. In a time like this one, but earlier, and a place like this one, but different, there lived a prince. He lived in a castle with his father on a high hill, far away from the cares and concerns of the wider world. The child's mother had been a great ruler, but was dead before the prince's memories began. His father was a great king who also knew much of magic. As a king, this man did well, and as a sorcerer, he enchanted the people of his kingdom. The prince was kept well by the king. The king doted on his son, keeping the boy's clothes and person clean and radiant, his hair trimmed handsomely short. He brought the finest tutors and entertainers in the kingdom directly to the castle, and would sometimes create small enchantments of his own to amuse the child. For much of his life, the prince did not go outside any further than the castle grounds and was content to stay where he was. But the king would also promise that someday the prince would meet with a beautiful princess. He would leave with her, be married, and then be happy. As the prince ceased to be a child and moved through adolescence, beginning to be an adult, he wished to see more. "Father," he would ask, "when shall I see what lies beyond the castle grounds? I know there is more than this, for you bring such wonderful people from out there, and have often told me that I shall someday make my own home in the wider world." "Son," the king would reply, "I must not let such a fine young man as yourself leave my side so soon. When you have met a beautiful princess and can be certain that you and she are both well off together, then you may find your own place in the wider world and carry on our fine family's history with children of your own." The king never said anything further on the matter, but this satisfied the prince for a time. This time ended on the day the prince posed a new question. His father again told him that he could leave when he met a beautiful princess, to which he responded, "How might I find a beautiful princess if I cannot go further than the castle grounds?" The king had fully intended on never letting the prince search for a bride himself, as he knew not what to look for. Instead, the king planned to look for potential matches via the traditional kingdom-wide ball, which every eligible woman in the kingdom was required to attend. But the king knew the prince would not be satisfied unless he could stretch his legs a little, and the ruler was certain his son could not get into trouble if he was only allowed to go so far. "Very well," the king told his son. "You may explore the paths down the hill and through the woods at the foot of our high hill, but you must not stray further than the largest oak tree. Most importantly, you must never go near the lake at the edge of the forest. That is a dangerous place." So the prince would explore the paths down the hill and through the woods at the foot of the high hill during his leisure time. He and the king were both satisfied, for a time, as the prince got to stretch his legs a little and the king knew where his son was. When the prince came home, servants would bathe him, clean his clothes, brush and cut his hair. But the king had not bothered to ask how the prince was getting on with his lessons. If he had, he would know that his son did not know how to tell an oak tree from any other, nor tell which was the largest. It was pure chance that the prince had not strayed from the limits his father had set until this point. So the young prince wandered beyond the largest oak tree and found himself at the edge of the forest. There sat a lake that shimmered in the sunlight breaking through the treetops, enticing the young one to look into its waters. "How beautiful the sun on that lake looks," said the prince. "I fear this may be the lake my father warned me about, and the one he said was a dangerous place, but it is so enchanting I have never seen its like. Besides, I need to quench my thirst. Father cannot fault me for that. Perhaps I can even wash my face in this lake. He would be proud to see me keeping clean without being told." The prince walked to the lake and peered into it. In the water, he saw something that made his heart beat faster. Someone, to be accurate. She was a princess dressed in a dark but glittering ball gown, long hair reaching out from her head in strands like the roots of a tree. Upon seeing her, the prince knew her name to be Water Lily, and that she was everything he had ever wanted. He called out to her, hoping she would hear. Water Lily, Water Lily, I wish to be closer to you. But the princess made no indication that she could hear the prince. She simply looked back up at him. The prince, knowing he would never be satisfied until he could be close to Water Lily, ran home to his father. The king was at his throne, idling away the time with simple enchantments, when his son burst into the throne room. Father, said the young one, please don't be cross with me, but I must tell you about my discovery. I was lost in the woods, but I found myself at a most beautiful lake. I fear it may be the very lake you warned me about, but I will dispel your fear by telling you what I have found. In the lake, I saw a most beautiful princess, everything you said she would be. I already know she is the one who I must marry. The princess did not tell his father the princess was named Water Lily, for he knew the king would ask how he knew her name, and the prince himself did not know. But she will not answer me when I call to her, the prince continued. I fear she may be in some sort of enchanted sleep. You are a worker of mighty magics, father. Can you wake her? The king knew the truth of the situation and was determined to hide it. He was also angry at his son for disobeying him and longed to punish him, but knew that would only push his son away from him. So the king found another way to keep his child from the truth. Here is a chance to give my son the travel he has longed for, the king thought to himself, and to keep him away from the lake and to make a little money at the same time. I can work the spell that will wake the princess, said the king, but to cast the spell I must have the heart of a witch, and you must bring it to me. Otherwise the spell will not be strong enough. Very well, said the prince. If that is what must be done, then I will do it. In the village, there lived a witch. She had once been a simple girl who looked in the mirror every day and saw that she was not good enough. She tried to make the shoe fit with force and violence and anger and tears, but nothing escaped the eyes of the girl in the mirror. This persisted until the day she looked in the mirror and saw not a girl, but a witch. The witch in the mirror taught her the magical arts, and she became a success in the village. She healed, she crafted love spells, she used her spells to reverse the enchantments placed on the village by the king. These disenchantments never lasted long, but they were enough to set some people on their right paths, the ones they had made themselves. The witch was preparing a spell to awaken her one true love, the girl now asleep in her bed, from her long, sickly, sweet, enchanted sleep, when the prince broke down the door. Witch, he exclaimed, I have come to take your heart away. The witch grinned. Figuratively or literally? She asked. If it be the former, I fear my heart already belongs to another. She gestured to the never-waking figure in her bed. I fear it is the latter, said the prince, who did not quite understand the witch's words, but had no time to question them. I must kill you to win my own heart's desire, and you must comply, for I am the son of the king of this land. Is that so? Said the witch, her grin becoming a smirk. She then recited a rhyme the prince had never heard before. Trust not the king who rules this land. He evades tongue and heart and hand. If you would take my heart away, your true desires will never stay. How dare you speak ill of my father? Bellowed the prince. What proof have you that he has done such wrong? None but that which has already been placed before your eyes, said the witch, and I fear your vision is too clouded to see it. If you can offer me no better proof, said the prince, then you must die. He drew his knife. The witch, who already knew her time to be up, made one final plea. Might you instead let me loose into the forest with my love, where no one will ever see us again? You could bring your father a boar's heart in place of mine to exchange for your heart's desire. I fear only your heart can satisfy the spell, said the prince, and I haven't the knack for hunting. He then plunged his knife into the witch's chest and pulled out her still beating heart. It seemed neither the witch nor her love would ever wake again. The prince returned home with his prize, once again bursting into the throne room unannounced. "Father!" he exclaimed, throwing the bloody witch's organ into the lap of his father, who was startled and more than a little disgusted. "I have what you asked for. Might you now break the princess's enchantment?" "You have done well, son," said the king, smiling to hide his annoyance that his new garments were soiled with witch's blood. "I shall leave to perform the spell now." The king left his throne room, and, after changing out of his bloody clothes, which he gave to the servants to scrub, wrapped the heart in butcher's paper. He then met with a group of nobles, and sold them the heart. The heart of a witch is not easily obtained, and the upper class will pay a fair sum to have one. The next day, the prince set out to the lake again. Peering in, he saw Water Lily, beautiful as ever, and his desire for her was so strong that he felt cold despite the summer weather and shook all over. He called out to her again, Water Lily, I wish to be closer to you." But the spell was not broken, and no response came. The king was admiring his now blood-stained free robe when the prince burst into the throne room, unannounced as always. "Father," he cried out, "something must have stopped your spell from working. The princess still lies in the water, never saying a word." The king realized that his son was determined to know the princess. But the king was determined that he never learn her secrets, and did not like anyone questioning the credibility of his spells, especially when they were false ones. "This spell must not have been strong enough," he told his son. "If you bring me the hands of a gnome, I may be able to waken the princess from her slumber." "Very well," said the prince. "If that is what must be done, then I will do it." "Before you go," said the king, "be sure to ask one of the servants to cut your hair. It has grown too long on your journey, and is not becoming of a prince." "Of course, father," said the prince. The next day the prince set out for the underground domain of the gnomes. He forgot all about his father's words, and his hair continued to grow long on his journey. In a world like this one, but deeper, there lived a gnome. He lived with his kindred in the tunnels he had made with his own hands, selling jewels he had unearthed and metal masterworks from his family's forge to anyone who would buy. He sold arm rings that increased the strength of any who wore them, and these were coveted by many in the village, but were equally coveted by the occupants of the castle, who confiscated them whenever they could. He could also forge finer, more delicate things. He had once forged a head of silver hair, then crafted a dress from bits of stardust he had linked together piece by piece. He would sometimes dance in these in a tavern in the village, to the delight of its guests. The witch and her one true love had been frequent guests at the tavern, and were always delighted by the gnome's performances. The gnome was forging another arm ring for himself, for he had sold his last the day before, when the prince crashed in from the tunnels above unannounced. "Gnome," he exclaimed, "I have come to take your hands away." "I can assure you," said the gnome, "that my hands would be much more use to you attached to me. For the right price, I can craft wonders you can only dream of." "I'm afraid I need those hands separate from you, said the prince. That is the only way the spell can be satisfied. And that spell is the key to realizing the only dream I care to have anymore. Besides, you mustn't ask a price of me. I must take your hands to see my dream come true, and you must comply, for I am the son of the king of this land. Is that so? Said the gnome, giving a grin that contained too many teeth and not enough humor for the prince's liking. He then recited a rhyme the prince had heard once before and didn't care to hear again. Trust not the king who rules this land. He evades tongue and heart and hand. If you would take my hands away, your true desires will never stay. How dare you speak ill of my father? Bellowed the prince. What proof have you that he has done such wrong? None but that which has already been placed before your eyes, said the gnome, and I fear your vision is too clouded to see it. If you can offer me no better proof, said the prince, then I shall take your hands. He drew his axe. The gnome, who already knew his time to be up, made one final plea. If you take my hands from me, I am as good as dead. If I am to die, might it be on my own terms? I could forge a pair of red-hot iron shoes in which I could dance one last time before I fall down dead. I fear I must have your hands now, said the prince. I haven't the time for dancing. He then brought his axe down on the gnome's hands, lopping them clean off before the gnome could cry out for help. The gnome was no use to his family or the rest of the world without his hands, so he retreated deeper into the earth. Good as dead to the world, where he prepared to die of starvation. The prince returned home with his 2 prizes, once more interrupting the king as he held court in the throne room. Father, he exclaimed, lobbing the 2 bloody hands at his father, who was more prepared for what was to happen, but still disgusted. I have what you asked for. Might you now break the princess's enchantment? You have done well, son, said the king, smiling to hide his annoyance. His new garments were dirtied again. Gnome's blood is silver and glints in the moonlight, unlike the blood of a human witch. But to the king, blood was still blood. I shall leave to perform the spell now. The king left his throne room, and after changing out of his bloody clothes, which he gave to the servants to scrub, wrapped the hands in butcher's paper. He then met with a group of alchemists and sold them the hands. The silver blood of a gnome is not easily obtained, and alchemists thought they might find the secret to the magic of a gnome's craft. The alchemists originally told the king they would pay him in the gold they were to make from lead, but the king made them pay up front and made a fair sum. The next day, the prince set out to the lake again. Peering in, he saw Water Lily. She seemed to glitter brighter than ever, and her hair cascaded down to her knees before spreading every which way. Trying not to cry on account of how beautiful she was, the prince called out to her again, Water Lily, I wish to be closer to you. But the princess was silent as ever. She seemed, however, to move whenever he moved, a mockery of the prince's actions. The prince, however, felt that his actions were the mockery. He struck the water with his fists, cursing the happiness he knew could never be his, though it was right in front of him. He sobbed until his tears blotted the image of Water Lily from his eyes. The king was lounging atop his throne, counting his gold, when the prince burst into the throne room, unannounced as always. Father, he cried out, you must do something else to make the spell stronger yet. The princess still lies silent under the water, and I fear I may die of sadness if I cannot have her. The king now had no qualms about sending his son on errands for him, aside from the occasional blood spatter. He was certain that the prince would never find out the secret of the lake, and he liked having an errand boy to help him make money. "Do not be so dramatic," he told his son. "If you bring me the tongue of a demon, I may be able to waken your princess still." "Very well, father," said the prince. "If that is what must be done, then I will do it." "When did your hair get so long?" asked the king. "You must get one of the servants to cut it this time. It has grown even longer and is even less becoming of a prince." "Of course, father," said the prince. "I will have a servant cut it this time." The next day the prince set out to find the lair of a demon. He forgot all about his father's words, and his hair continued to grow long on his journey. In a cave on the furthest outskirts of the city, there lived a demon. It was not there by choice. It despised the race of men, and had lived in a world of beautiful pain with the rest of demon kind, until a certain sorcerer king summoned it to do his bidding. The demon had spat in the king's face and run to the furthest place it could find from the world of men. This happened to be a cave on the outskirts of the village, as the demon was not built for scaling the mountains that surrounded the village. So it sat there in its cave, hating mankind. The demon was scratching a gash in its arm with its talon, savoring the pain, when the prince stepped into its cave. "Demon," he exclaimed, "I have come to take your tongue away." The demon looked at the prince and grinned with even more teeth than the gnome, and sharper. "Welcome, friend," it said. "Have a seat." "I cannot," said the prince, his voice faltering slightly. "I must cut your tongue out to use for a spell that will waken my one true love from her slumber." The demon made no response to the prince's words. It only gestured at a sitting place on the ground with even greater impatience. "My father is the king?" The prince trailed off meaningfully, hoping this would get a reaction from the demon. "Is he really? Why don't you sit here with me and tell me all about him?" the demon offered. "Aren't you going to recite a verse?" asked the prince. "Something telling me to beware of my father? I have heard it twice before now." The demon shook its head. "I haven't the knack for rhyming," it said. "Which makes me wonder why a spell would want my tongue. I have never paid attention to the magics of men. I hate mankind, you know." The prince sat down across from the demon. "If you hate mankind, how come you invited me in?" he asked. "Perhaps you should ask yourself the same question," said the demon. "So, your father is the king?" "Yes," said the prince. "I knew your mother," said the demon. "She was a fine woman. This is her sword." He produced a sword from behind its back and handed it to the prince. "It is yours now." The prince looked at the blade, and right enough, there was his mother's name engraved on its side. He looked up to the demon with something of trust. "What shall I do with it?" he asked. "Take it back to your father in place of my tongue," said the demon. "Don't let me tell you what to do beyond that. When you see your father, and your father sees the blade, then you will know what to do." "Would you come with me?" asked the prince. "I'm frightened to return to my father alone, even with my mother's formidable weapon at my side." "Is that truly what you wish?" The demon smiled wider. "Yes." "Then I shall come with you." On their way back to the castle, the demon and the prince conversed as neither had ever conversed before. The prince spoke of his childhood, the demon of its faraway home of fire and thorns. Neither quite understood the ways of the other, but both took pleasure in the other's company. After the long walk, the pair reached the doors of the castle. The prince looked at the demon, an unspoken question in his eyes. "This is as far as I dare go," said the demon. "I suspect your father would not be pleased to see me. You must face him, alone." The prince nodded, took a deep breath, opened the door to the throne room, and walked inside. The king was expecting his son's arrival, but he was not expecting it to be so quiet. The prince opened the throne room door slowly, timidly, one arm behind his back. "Have you the demon's tongue?" asked the king, frightened by his son's silence. "If you do, I shall take it, and hopefully your love will be wakened this time." "I have brought no demon's tongue with me, father," said the prince. His timidness was gradually being replaced with resolve, and that frightened the king even more. "Nor any other ingredient to break the spell. Instead, I have brought this." The prince brought his mother's sword out from behind his back. It glinted under the now risen full moon that shone through the castle's windows. "What have you to say for yourself, father?" "What mean you, son?" asked the king. "What is this blade in your hand?" "Answer my questions first," said the prince. "Why did you not tell me my mother was a warrior? What else have you kept from me?" "I have kept nothing from you, my son," said the king, who was shaking all over and refused to meet his child's eyes. "And what proof have you that your mother was a warrior? I have told you no such thing." "No," said the prince, "you haven't. And yet, here is her name engraved on this blade." He pointed the sword in his hand at his father. "What proof have you that you have not done me wrong?" "You have brought a demon's tongue with you," said the king, "and it is in your head. Be silent. And you have still not cut your hair. Sometimes I feel as if you are not my son." At that moment, the king's child knew what had to be done. "Perhaps I am not your son," said the young one, "and perhaps the false tongue is the one in your head. For if you can offer me no better proof, then I must take the head from your neck." And without further hesitation, the king's head was lopped clean off. As soon as her father's head hit the ground, the princess knew herself to be who she was. She still wore a prince's garment, but that mattered not. Her hair had not yet grown down to her knees, but that also mattered not. She was Water Lily. At the realization that she was free from her father's spell, that the lake contained the water of true seeing, and that she had always had her heart's desire inside of her, Water Lily wept for joy. Her tears were hard and cut her cheek, and the princess looked down to see that her tears were jewels. At that moment, the king's daughter knew what had to be done. She met with the demon outside the castle door and embraced it joyfully and told it all that had passed. They talked more of their lives as they walked together and found themselves to be more alike than they had thought. Water Lily gave her tears to the nobles who coveted their shine and to the alchemists who wished to experiment on them. With these, she bought back the heart of the witch and the hands of the gnome. She used her father's magics to return the witch's heart to her chest and the life to her body. After the witch had awakened and had cast the spell that woke her one true love, The two kissed and thanked Water Lily. The princess gave more of her tears to the couple, and in exchange they gave her a potion that made her hair grow then and there until it had reached her knees. She used her father's magics to return the gnome's hands to his body and the life to his fingers. After the gnome had fully unburied himself and finished forging his new arm ring, he bowed and thanked Water Lily. The princess gave more of her tears to the gnome and his kindred, and they crafted her a ball gown from a fallen piece of the night sky, dark but glittering. Water Lily ruled upon the throne for many years, the demon by her side as her advisor, and was well liked by all. But she knew this could not last. When the time came, Water Lily lifted the enchantment her father had placed over the kingdom. The people would soon realize that they did not need her and were their own rulers. She sent the servants away with more money than they knew what to do with, and departed from the castle, leaving it to rot. She walked down through the familiar trees to the familiar lake. After giving the demon a final parting embrace, she descended into the water. There she would live out the rest of her days, reflecting the truth back on young princesses who did not yet know they were princesses.